The Philadelphia experiment is a real military experiment in which the USS Eldridge, D-173, became invisible. On January 13, 1955, a well-known researcher of mysterious phenomena, especially the UFO phenomenon, Morris K. Jessup, received a strange letter from a certain Carlos Allende. The letter contained data revealed by this Carlos about his involvement in what he called the Philadelphia experiments. In short, Carlos Allende said that he was a member of the crew of the destroyer USS Eldridge, an American battleship involved throughout 1943 in a series of experiments related to the ability to hide warships from radar. The experiments began in early 1943 at the military shipyard in the port of Philadelphia. The series of top-secret experiments received the call sign Rainbow. The experiments were led by physicist Dr. Franklin Reno, but certain witnesses later interviewed by Jessup stated that they had seen the physicist Albert Einstein and a year earlier Nikola Tesla. In the summer of 1943, more precisely in July, the experiments were almost successful. The equipment installed aboard the USS Eldridge worked perfectly, so that the ship became invisible to radar. The problem that arose was that the huge ship was enveloped, during the experiments, in a gray cloud, strongly electrostatically charged. Witnesses on the ship said that the metal equipment gave off strange, blue-green sparks. Then, on October 28, 1943, the experiment was resumed, apparently to make the ship invisible to the eye, just as a glass bead disappears in a glass of water. In the morning the experiment started, the ship was surrounded by the famous gray cloud, then the energy pulsating in the equipment was gradually intensified. The sailors heard the whirring of the equipment, and witnesses saw from the pier how the ship disappeared, along with the gray fog. Interestingly, the trace of the ship was visible in the water, like an impression of a gigantic shoe. Then this trace also disappeared. The ship had volatilized. Immediately, the phones rang at the Philadelphia Naval Base, and those in the port of Norfolk, located 600 kilometers away, announced in fear that the USS Eldridge was at the entrance to their port. They did not have time to figure out what and how, because those in Norfolk called nervously to say that they could no longer see the destroyer, and the ship reappeared in its place. The sailors recounted nightmarish scenes. Some had disappeared, others had simply burned to death by spontaneous combustion, but those still on board suffered terribly. The U.S. Navy immediately ordered the cessation of all experiments, and the USS Eldridge was sold to the Greek Navy after the war. Jessup investigated Allende's claims, who had since disappeared, and asked the U.S. Navy about the events in Philadelphia Harbor during 1943. Although initially vehemently denied it, the U.S. Navy eventually admitted that some research had been conducted into the application of electromagnetic force to hide ships from radar. Jessup had already gathered enough evidence, but he never got around to making it public, as he committed suicide one rainy evening by jumping from a hotel window. Apparently, the man had no reason to die. He was at the height of his journalistic glory, but the police investigation determined that he threw himself from the window. The file containing the evidence related to the first successful teleportation experiment disappeared, and public opinion was left with a legend that will probably never be elucidated: what happened that October morning in 1943 in the port of Philadelphia.